Capitalism is unstable, unequal and fundamentally undemocratic, but at the same time it allows individuals to make autonomous decisions about their lives, professions, work preferences, and activities. Capitalism has transformed the historical system of slavery and feudalism into employers and employees relationship, but capitalism also promotes the concept of private property, which is vital but not sufficient for creating a free and open society, as there is unreliable growth, inequality and exploitation. In this video we will not discuss problems of capitalism, as you already know that, but you will know how capitalism became the dominant economic model. First you need to understand what kind of systems were there before capitalism, which were feudalism, communalism, barterism and guildism. Feudalism was the dominant economic and social system in medieval Europe, which was characterized by a hierarchical structure where land was the primary source of wealth and power. Lords owned large estates and land were made nobles in empires in exchange for loyalty and military service. Peasants, known as serfs, worked the land and paid rent or tribute to the lords in the form of agricultural produce. While in barterism, goods and services were exchanged directly without the use of currency, as people produced only what they needed for their own survival, with little surplus for trade. In guild system, mostly in medieval Europe, organizations of skilled craftsmen and merchants were there that regulated and controlled the production and sale of goods within their respective areas. Guilds had a central role in organizing economic activity and ensuring quality standards. On the other hand, in some indigenous societies and communities practiced collective ownership and resource sharing, which is known as communism. The history of capitalism is a subject of intense historical research and debate. Historians grapple with various questions, including whether capitalism is an innate human behavior, the role of trade and property relations, the role of classes, and the influence of European imperialism. There are two main historiographical schools of thought on capitalism: economic liberals, influenced by figures like Adam Smith, and Marxists' views on capitalism. The history of capitalism can be traced back to the 16th century, with earlier forms of capitalist institutions existing in ancient times. However, it was during the later Middle Ages in Europe and the subsequent growth of the English cloth industry that capitalism began to develop as a distinct economic system. What set capitalism apart was its emphasis on using accumulated capital to expand productive capacity rather than investing in non-productive ventures. Several factors contributed to the development of capitalism. The Protestant Reformation of the 16th century reduced traditional disdain for wealth accumulation and promoted the virtues of hard work and frugality, aligning economic success with religious approval. Economic inequality was justified by the belief that the wealthy were morally superior. Additionally, the increase in Europe's precious metals supply led to inflation, with wages lagging rising prices, benefiting capitalists. The emergence of strong national states during the mercantilist era provided the necessary conditions for economic development. The mercantilist beliefs in government intervention that keeps trade in states balanced by imposing tax on imports and keeping local products competitive. In the 18th century, capitalism shifted its focus from commerce to industry, marking the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. This transition was exemplified by the ideas of Adam Smith, who was a Scottish economist and philosopher known as the father of capitalism. He authored two significant works, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, in 1759, and An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, in 1776, with the latter being considered his masterpiece. He advocated for laissez-faire economic policies and challenged mercantilism. In his book, The Theory of Moral Sentiments, he introduced the concept of the invisible hand, which describes how free markets self-regulate through competition, supply and demand, and self-interest. Smith's most significant work, An Inquiry into the Nature and Causes of the Wealth of Nations, laid the foundation for modern capitalism. He believed in minimal government intervention in the economy, opposing the prevailing mercantilist models of his time. In response to prevailing mercantilist policies, Smith laid the foundation for classical free market economic theory. His work emphasized concepts like the division of labor and how rational self-interest and competition could lead to economic prosperity. His influence contributed to Britain's shift towards free trade and laissez-faire economics during the Industrial Revolution. His ideas spread through the British Empire, promoting open markets and international trade. Britain's growing industry led to innovations in finance and credit during the 18th century. Banking services expanded, and the Bank of England began issuing banknotes. The central banking system emerged, tied to gold reserves, and these banknotes became widely available. Merchant banking firms like the Rothschilds and Barings played prominent roles in the global financial landscape. Britain embraced free trade and liberalism in the 19th century, promoting competition and market economy development. The repeal of the Corn Laws and Navigation Acts ushered in an era of free trade. The first era of globalization began, marked by Britain's trade expansion and the spread of industrialization. Imperialism played a role in this period, as European powers sought resources and markets in newly conquered regions. But pure capitalism started to end in 20th century as World War I brought significant changes, such as the abandonment of the gold standard, the rise of the United States in the global economy, and the multiplication of trade barriers. The Great Depression of the 1930s ended the era of laissez-faire policies in most countries and fostered sympathy for socialism among various groups. The Great Depression of the 1930s triggered criticism of capitalism, leading to various responses. Fascism and state capitalism emerged as ideologies, while others turned to communism or democratic socialism. In the post-World War II period, capitalist economies, many with welfare state elements, performed well and regained confidence. However, starting in the 1970s, increasing economic inequality raised doubts about capitalism's long-term viability, and the financial crisis of 2008 and the subsequent Great Recession renewed interest in socialism, especially among younger generations. Keynesian economics gained acceptance as a method of government regulation, and mixed economies developed, with some industries owned and operated by the state. The role of the state expanded in the capitalist economies, with increased government expenditures. Hence the 21st century sees mixed economies with capitalist elements as well as welfare elements. Tell me in comments that which kind of economic system do you like and why.